Hello everyone, welcome to today's story. What would you do if your heart stood at the edge of two worlds, between a past that still burns and a present that offers peace? Can passion ever be replaced by serenity? Or does love always demand a choice between fire and calm? And when shadows rise, threatening not only the heart but also life itself, will Alex be strong enough to protect Lytuna and her child? Or will the past return to claim what peace has built? Stay with us until the very end to uncover the answers hidden in silence, glances, and choices that change everything. And if you enjoy stories filled with emotion, suspense, and life lessons, don't forget to subscribe and help us reach 10,000 followers. Your support means the world, and it keeps these stories alive. The night unfolded like a forgotten reel of film, its frames trembling in silence, its colors dissolving into soft shades of gold and gray. Lytuna stood still, her body anchored in the present, yet her spirit wandered back to the landscapes of memory where love once blazed like fire. She could almost hear the laughter echoing through narrow streets, feel the warmth of a hand that once steadied her trembling fingers, taste the rain that mingled with stolen kisses under a fragile umbrella. That love had once seemed invincible, a force greater than time itself. But time, merciless and unrelenting, had stripped it bare. What was once whole now lived only in fragments, the curve of a smile, a promise whispered with trembling lips, the ache of longing in eyes that never spoke their truth aloud. Each memory carried a contradiction, sweetness braided tightly with sorrow, tenderness bound to loss. To remember was to bleed, to forget was to betray what once gave her life its meaning. Her heart swayed in this paradox, caught between a yearning to hold on and a plea to let go. The silence around her grew heavy, like a witness to her unrest. Even the night sky seemed to hesitate, the moon casting shadows that stretched like reminders across her skin. And still, within this ache, there was something strangely luminous. The past refused to vanish. It lingered like the faint scent of flowers long withered, a ghost of beauty refusing to die. Lytuna closed her eyes, knowing that even broken love could leave behind a grace that shimmered quietly, fragile yet eternal, within the deepest corners of her soul. Morning light filtered through the curtains, soft and pale, like the breath of dawn brushing gently across the room. Lytuna sat quietly by the window, her child resting in her arms, small and warm against her chest. The rhythm of the child's breathing was steady, a fragile reminder that life had shifted, that her heart now beat in tandem with another. In these moments, silence was not empty. It was filled with the tender weight of responsibility, the quiet anchor of love. Across the room, Alex watched her with a gaze steady as the horizon. His presence carried no storms, no violent tempest of passion, but rather the calmness of a still river at dusk. With him, there was no chaos, no uncertainty, only a quiet steadiness that made the air easier to breathe. He offered safety, a shelter from the ruins of the past, a place where Lytuna could lay down her burdens without fear of collapse. Yet, even as the room glowed with this serenity, a faint shadow lingered in her eyes. The memory of a fire once burned within her still flickered in the silence. She wondered if peace could ever replace the passion that once defined her. Could calmness truly fill the void where wild love once roared? Lytuna lowered her gaze to her child, brushing a strand of hair from the small forehead. In that fragile face lay both her future and her choice. She exhaled slowly, the morning air heavy with both gratitude and doubt, as though the sunlight itself carried the question her heart could not answer. Night returned, draping the world in silence. Lytuna sat alone, the dim glow of a single lamp spilling across the floor, as if light itself hesitated to touch her shadows. Her thoughts circled endlessly, pulled between two opposing tides, the memory of love that once burned like wildfire and the steady calm of Alex's presence. Both lived inside her, tugging at her heart until it ached. She closed her eyes, and the past rushed in, uncontrollable, like waves breaking against fragile cliffs. She could still feel the urgency of old embraces, the reckless courage of a love that cared nothing for consequence. Yet that same love had left her broken, staring at an emptiness she never thought she could survive. Now, when Alex stood beside her, she felt a different kind of weight, the soft, persistent call of peace. He was no storm, but a harbor. Her child stirred gently in the other room, a sound so delicate it seemed to echo in her very soul. That small presence was both anchor and reminder. Every choice she made would shape not only her destiny, but the future of the fragile life depending on her. She pressed her hands together, as though in prayer, her breath trembling. Could passion and stability coexist? Or must one always be sacrificed for the other? The silence offered no answer. Only her reflection in the darkened glass stared back. Two versions of herself, one longing for fire, the other craving rest. In that moment she understood. Love was not merely a feeling. It was a decision, one she had yet to make. The streets at night felt different now. What once seemed ordinary carried a weight of unease, as if the air itself had turned colder. Lytuna walked with her child close to her side, yet her steps quickened against her will. Somewhere behind, she sensed it, eyes following, footsteps lingering in the shadows. The world, once muted by her inner struggle, now sharpened into a fragile tension. She tried to dismiss it, telling herself it was only fear weaving illusions from the dark. But the silence was too deliberate, the stillness too heavy. She caught fragments of movement at the edge of her vision. A figure lingering too long at the corner. A car idling without reason, the faint shuffle of feet retreating when she turned her head. Danger was no longer a distant thought. It had entered her reality. Lytuna's heart beat faster, but not with the wild rhythm of passion. It was the pulse of survival. She tightened her grip on her child's hand, every instinct sharpening. In that fragile moment, memories of the past seemed almost merciful compared to the present fear wrapping around her like a net. The night stretched endlessly, each shadow whispering threat. Her breath grew shallow, yet she forced her steps to remain steady, refusing to betray the panic rising inside her chest. Somewhere in the darkness, choices were being made, not by her but by those who watched. And in that silence, she knew. The story of her heart was no longer only about love. It had become about protection, about survival, about the fragile thread of safety she could not let slip away. The night pressed closer, its silence broken only by the distant hum of passing cars. Lytuna stood at the threshold of her small apartment, her child nestled against her shoulder. Yet, even within the supposed safety of walls, unease seeped in like smoke through unseen cracks. She could feel it, an invisible weight pressing against the door, as though the danger outside had learned her name. Her hands trembled as she drew the curtains, each movement deliberate, fragile, almost ceremonial. Shadows seemed to linger longer than they should, stretching across the room with an unsettling patience. The faintest creak of the floorboards made her heart leap. Somewhere, out there in the dark, people waited. She did not know their faces, but she knew their intent, and that knowledge was enough to unravel her calm. She gathered her child tightly, pressing her lips against the soft hair, inhaling the fragile warmth. Fear carved itself into her, not for her own life, but for the tiny heartbeat resting against her chest. Every mother's instinct sharpened in her bones, whispering that she must protect, even when her strength felt as thin as glass. The quiet grew unbearable. Tuna closed her eyes, listening to her own breath, to the muted tick of the clock, to the silence beyond the walls that was far too heavy. It was not if they would come, but when. And in that suspended moment she realized the heart's struggles with love and memory were small compared to the terror of losing what she could never replace. The call reached Alex in fragments, panic woven through Tuna's voice, the kind of fear that strips words of clarity. He did not hesitate. The stillness that usually defined him broke apart as he moved swiftly through the night, every step driven by a force larger than reason. For so long, he had been her quiet harbor, the man who offered calm instead of fire. But now he was being asked for something greater, to stand against the storm itself. When he arrived, the air was thick with dread. Shadows clung to the corners of the street, shapes that seemed too patient, too deliberate. He could sense eyes watching, waiting, calculating. Alex's heart pounded, not with fear for himself, but with a desperate urgency to shield Tuna and the child pressed close to her side. As he approached her, their eyes met, hers wide with terror, his steady with resolve. In that moment, words were unnecessary. What she needed was not promises, not even comfort, but action. Alex stepped forward, his body placing itself between her and the darkness that threatened to consume her. The choice was silent but absolute. He could no longer remain only the quiet presence she leaned on. He had to become something more, a barrier, a protector, a force willing to risk everything. And in that fragile pause before the inevitable confrontation, Alex understood that love was not just serenity. Sometimes love was the courage to fight the shadows for the sake of someone else's tomorrow. The night did not answer with certainty. It stretched on, vast and heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Alex stood firm, his body a shield before Tuna and the fragile child clinging to her side. The shadows lingered, their threat unspoken yet undeniable, a reminder that safety could dissolve in a single heartbeat. Tuna's eyes, wide and searching, rested on Alex. In them was a question she could not voice. Would he be enough to save them? The silence between them swelled, deeper than any words, carrying both fear and hope. She felt her heart tremble with a new weight, not only of survival, but of choice. For love was no longer about memory or passion alone. It had become bound to the future, to the fragile promise of tomorrow. Alex did not move, yet in his stillness there was defiance. His presence told her more than any vow could, that he would face the danger, that he would not abandon her to the darkness. And yet, whether strength was enough, neither of them knew. The night closed around them like an unfinished story, its final chapter unwritten. Tuna held her child tighter, her breath steadying against the storm of uncertainty. Perhaps the question was not only whether Alex could save them, but whether she could let herself be saved. For in love, choices carve destinies more than outcomes do. And sometimes the most enduring truth is found not in resolution, but in the courage to stand at the edge of the unknown, together.
Tử Na đứng giữa hai lựa chọn, quá khứ rực lửa nhưng đầy tổn thương, hiện tại bình yên bên Alex cùng đứa con nhỏ. Trong ký ức cô vẫn nhớ về tình yêu mãnh liệt từng cháy bỏng, để lại vết thương sâu trong tim. Nhưng hiện tại Alex mang nhiều đến sự tĩnh lặng vững chãi, một bến đỗ an toàn, giằng xé giữa đam mê và bình yên. Tử Na chưa kịp đưa ra quyết định thì bóng tối bất ngờ ập đến. Mẹ con cô bị theo dõi, âm mưu bắt cóc, rình rập, nỗi sợ sinh tồn lấn át cản trở tình cảm. Alex buộc phải lựa chọn từ một người đàn ông lặng lẽ trở thành kẻ đối diện nguy hiểm để bảo vệ những người anh yêu.